morning air was damp with dew, and everything in the Carolina Wildlife Reserve was still half asleep. The birds had not yet begun their songs, and the staff were only beginning to check in on the animals. But nature had its own rhythm, and, somewhere beyond the man-made fences and watchtowers, something urgent was already unfolding. A tiny puppy, barely old enough to open its eyes fully, limped near the edge of a narrow ravine. Mud clung to its fur, and the pads of its feet were raw from walking across jagged rocks and twigs. The puppy's body shook with each step, and every now and then it let out a desperate, heartbreaking cry. There was no one to answer. Unknown to the sanctuary team, the area beyond the eastern fence had become home to a pack of wild dogs, descendants of pets once abandoned or lost. Over time, they had formed a tightly bonded group, surviving together by hunting and scavenging. Though not officially part of the reserve, they were well known to the staff, who kept a cautious eye on their movements. From behind a thicket of tall grass, the leader of the pack, a scar-faced black dog named Ghost, lifted his head. He had heard the sound, so had the rest of the pack. Ghost stared for a moment, ears flicking, then began to move forward without a sound. The others followed, gliding through the underbrush like a trained unit. To the pack, the whimpering meant weakness. In nature, weakness was often met with aggression or exclusion. The puppy, small and unable to run, was now surrounded. Back at the sanctuary center, morning rounds were underway. Among the animals under special observation was Coco, a silverback gorilla who had lived at the reserve since he was young. Unlike others of his kind, Coco had displayed signs of unusually calm, intelligent behavior, once even helping reunite a lost bird with its nest. He was deeply observant and carried a quiet presence that many of the staff described as almost human. As his caretaker, Lena, prepared his breakfast, Coco suddenly rose from his mat and moved to the far corner of his enclosure. He looked out toward the trees, then beat his chest once, not in aggression, but softly, rhythmically. He tapped the ground with a large hand, then stood still, gazing toward the woods. Lena tilted her head. "What is it, boy?" she asked. Coco didn't respond. Instead, he turned his back to the caretakers and moved toward the secured gate. And somehow, through instinct or something else entirely, the team made a decision they rarely did. They opened the gate to the outer training corridor that led to the forest's edge. Coco stepped through without hesitation. In the ravine clearing, the puppy lay motionless, barely breathing. Ghost growled lowly, circling, his pack falling into place. Then, without warning, a loud snapping of branches interrupted the standoff. A towering figure moved through the trees. The wild dogs froze. Coco entered the clearing, walking on all fours, powerful but not hurried. His dark eyes surveyed the scene. He glanced once at Ghost, then moved directly between the dogs and the trembling puppy. No barking came this time. The dogs simply stopped and watched. Coco slowly sat beside the puppy. The small animal flinched at first, then curled into the soft fur of the gorilla's arm. With deliberate care, Coco began to stroke the puppy's side with a gentle hand. It was a sight so strange, so far outside the usual rules of the animal kingdom, that it seemed surreal. Ghost stood still, muscles tight, but after a long pause, he turned his head and gave a soft whine. Then he walked away, followed by the rest of the pack. From the ridge above, a wildlife camera blinked red, recording every second. Back at the sanctuary, Lena's radio crackled. "You need to come see this," a voice said. Now, as Lena and the team rushed to the scene, no one could have guessed what they would find. A puppy moments from death, rescued not by humans, but by the most unlikely protector in the forest, and a pack of wild dogs that had simply walked away. Lena stood at the edge of the ravine, completely frozen. She had seen many strange things during her time at the Carolina Wildlife Reserve, but nothing like this. In front of her, Coco sat calmly in the grass, one arm wrapped protectively around a frail, dirt-covered puppy. The massive presence was peaceful, his broad chest rising and falling slowly as he shielded the puppy like it was one of his own. And just beyond the clearing, half hidden in the brush, the pack of wild dogs still lingered. Ghost, the leader of the pack, stood tall and tense. His yellow eyes were locked on Coco, watching every move. Around him, his pack shifted restlessly, torn between curiosity and instinct. They weren't used to being challenged, certainly not by something so outside their understanding. A gorilla was not prey, not a rival, and definitely not part of their usual world. The situation should have exploded, but it didn't. Coco didn't growl. He didn't charge. Instead, he gently picked up the puppy and pulled it closer, tucking the tiny body against his chest. The puppy let out a soft sound, not of fear but of relief. Lena, watching from a safe distance, slowly raised her radio and whispered, "I need backup here. Bring medical supplies and tranquilizer kits, but come quietly." More staff arrived within minutes. They fanned out in the trees, observing from the shadows. No one made a sound. The tension in the clearing was like a coiled spring. One wrong move could set everything off. But something unexpected happened. The pack didn't attack. Instead, they stayed. One by one, they began to sit. Not relaxed, just sit, watching, waiting. Ghost lay down first, his front paws crossed, his gaze never leaving Coco. Two of the younger dogs crept a little closer, but stopped a few feet away, and lay down to Dot. It wasn't submission. It wasn't dominance. It was something else, something even the staff couldn't quite explain. A kind of quiet understanding was growing among these very different animals. Coco, for his part, remained calm. He didn't acknowledge the dogs, but he didn't ignore them either. He stroked the puppy softly, his large fingers surprisingly gentle. Every few seconds, he would glance up and meet Ghost's eyes. There was no fear in Coco's face, only stillness. Lena finally spoke again through her radio. "No one moves. We observe. That's it." For nearly an hour, the scene held like that. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a distant bird. The puppy, now asleep in Coco's arms, was breathing more steadily. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. One of the sanctuary's biologists, Dr. Ray Chen, whispered to Lena, This is not normal behavior. Coco's acting like a guardian. And the dogs there, responding to him." Lena nodded. "They're not afraid, but they're not testing him either. It's like they're trying to understand him." Eventually, Coco shifted slightly. He stood up, cradling the puppy in one hand. Without a sound, he began walking back toward the sanctuary's outer corridor, the way he had come. Ghost stood as well. He didn't follow, but he also didn't try to block the way. Instead, he gave a short bark, a single note, and turned, disappearing into the trees. The rest of the pack followed. It was over, at least for now. Back at the sanctuary, Coco carried the puppy all the way to his enclosure. He didn't let the staff take her immediately. He held her close until a small padded bed was set down for her. Only then did he gently place the puppy inside and step back. He sat nearby, watching as the team cleaned the pup and checked her condition. "She's malnourished, dehydrated, and exhausted," said Dr. Chen. "But she's going to make it." Barely. Lena looked at Coco. "He saved her," she whispered. Outside the enclosure, the forest remained quiet, but deep in the trees, a pack of wild dogs paused. Ghost sniffed the air, then trotted ahead with purpose. Something had changed in their world, and it wasn't over yet. The sun rose higher over the sanctuary, casting warm light across the eastern enclosure. The puppy, now resting in a small padded bed just inside Coco's quarters, looked like a different animal than the one found in the ravine. Her fur had been gently cleaned, the burrs removed, and a tiny red cloth had been tied loosely around her neck to mark her as under special care. She was still weak, her body too small, her eyes still cautious, but she had stopped shaking, and Coco never left her side. The staff had assumed Coco's interest would fade once the puppy was safe, but they were wrong. He sat by her bed for hours, refusing meals until she stirred. When she whimpered, he leaned in and made a soft hooting sound, one he usually reserved for baby gorillas. He didn't treat her like a toy or a guest. He treated her like family. "She was bonded to him," Lena said, watching from behind the glass window that separated Coco's enclosure from the viewing area. "Or maybe he's bonded to her." The puppy, now officially named Moxie by the sanctuary team, began responding only to Coco's presence. When staff tried to pick her up, she whimpered, but when Coco approached, she'd wag her tail faintly and tried to crawl toward him. It was unusual, almost unsettling, but also touching beyond words. Meanwhile, cameras placed in the forest picked up movement. The wild dog pack had not left. Ghost and his pack were seen lingering near the ravine, occasionally venturing closer to the sanctuary's fence line. They weren't howling or scratching. They were just watching. One camera caught a moment where Ghost approached the exact spot where Moxie had been found. He sniffed the earth, circled once, and lay down. It was behavior the biologists couldn't quite explain. Back inside the sanctuary, Coco began including Moxie in his routines. During his daily walks around the enclosed habitat, he carried her carefully on his shoulder, holding her with one massive hand. The sight of a gorilla strolling peacefully with a puppy nestled against his neck was enough to make even the hardest scientists tear up. Visitors who had come to see endangered animals were now witnessing something far more rarer, pure, protective bond between two species that shared no natural connection. Moxie's health began improving quickly. She ate more, she moved more, and soon she began to play. Her first attempt at play was awkward tiny hops and a wagging tail, directed at one of Coco's enrichment toys. Coco watched, amused. He pushed the toy gently toward her with his finger. Moxie barked softly and pounced, missing by a few inches and tumbling onto her back. Coco responded by making a soft, puffing sound, the gorilla equivalent of laughter. Word about the unusual friendship spread quickly. Within days, local news stations arrived to cover the story. One headline read, "Gentle Giant becomes guardian of abandoned pup." Another called it nature's most unlikely friendship. But for the sanctuary staff, this wasn't just a feel-good story, it was a rare look into the emotional world of animals, where something deeper than instinct was at play. Lena spoke to reporters. "We don't know why Coco chose to step in, but what we're seeing here is real. It's consistent, it's strong. He didn't just protect her, he adopted her." What no one expected, though, was that the story wasn't over. The wild dog pack wasn't just observing from the woods. They were waiting for something. One morning, 3 members of the pack appeared just outside the sanctuary's east fence. They sat still, almost in formation. Their eyes weren't on the humans. They were on Coco's enclosure, on Moxie. Staff reviewed camera footage. It had happened more than once. Each time, the dogs came, waited silently for a while, then left. "I think they're watching over her," said Dr. Chen, "or waiting, but not to take her back. It feels more like respect." Inside the enclosure, Coco sat with Moxie curled beside him. He glanced toward the glass, toward the forest beyond, as if he knew they were there, and for the first time Moxie let out a sharp little bark, not out of fear, but something closer to recognition. Something was building something no one could quite name yet. Days passed, and the sanctuary settled into a new rhythm. Coco and Moxie became inseparable, the silverback's gentle care helping the tiny puppy regain strength day by day. Visitors came from far and wide, drawn by the unusual friendship, but the sanctuary staff remained focused on observing and protecting both animals. Outside the enclosure, the wild dog pack lingered near the forest's edge, close enough to keep watch but distant enough to avoid direct contact. Ghost, the leader, seemed less tense than before, his posture relaxed but alert. The pack's behavior had shifted subtly. They no longer growled or showed signs of aggression when Coco appeared. Instead, they observed with what looked like curiosity and restraint. One misty morning, Lena arrived early and noticed something new. Ghost and 2 other dogs were sitting at the boundary between the forest and the sanctuary. They sat quietly, tails low but wagging, slightly a rare sign of calm. Their eyes were fixed on Coco, who was sitting in his usual spot beside Moxie. The wild dogs had not come to attack or chase. Instead, they appeared to be waiting, as if for some silent signal. Lena carefully signaled the staff to hold back, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace. She watched as Ghost lifted his head and gave a single bark, not loud, not threatening. Coco responded almost immediately, rising to his feet and moving slowly toward the fence. The 2 groups faced each other across the narrow gap. Neither moved closer, but something unspoken passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement, a boundary respected. Ghost's ears twitched as he stared at Coco. Then, unexpectedly, the pack began to retreat. But their retreat was not hurried or fearful, it was deliberate and measured, as if they understood that the gorilla was not an enemy to flee from, but a guardian to be respected. Behind them, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The wild dogs vanished into the trees, leaving the clearing empty, but charged with meaning. The sanctuary staff was amazed. "It's like they recognize Coco's role," whispered Dr. Chen. "They don't fear him, they respect him." In the days that followed, the wild dog pack's visits became less frequent but more peaceful. They no longer circled the enclosure but instead lingered on the edge of the woods, watching from a distance. Their eyes seemed calm, and there was no sign of the territorial aggression they had once displayed. Meanwhile, Coco continued to care for Moxie with unwavering tenderness. The puppy's health improved daily, and she grew bolder, exploring her surroundings under Coco's watchful eye. She learned to climb small rocks, chase fallen leaves, and even playfully nip at Coco's fingers. The sanctuary's director, Mark Reynolds, called a meeting to discuss the extraordinary developments. "This isn't just about survival," he said. "It's about connection, something deeper than instinct." The staff agreed. What they were witnessing challenged long-held assumptions about animal behavior and interspecies relationships. One afternoon, Lena observed something that took her breath away. Coco, Moxie, and 3 of the wild dogs sat together in a sunlit clearing, sharing space without tension or threat. The dogs were calm, their tails wagging gently. Coco sat quietly, occasionally glancing at Moxie as she playfully chased a butterfly. Was a scene that defied nature's usual rules, a moment of fragile harmony. The sanctuary's cameras captured the moment, and soon the footage was shared worldwide. People were moved by the unlikely friendship and the peaceful coexistence between species often seen as natural enemies. As the story spread, animal behavior experts began to study the footage, trying to understand what had sparked such an extraordinary bond. Back at the sanctuary, life continued with cautious optimism. Coco's role as protector seemed firmly established, and the wild dogs no longer posed a threat to Moxie. But beneath the surface, a new chapter was beginning, one that would test the limits of compassion and the power of understanding. The sanctuary had become a place of quiet wonder. Every morning, visitors arrived early, hoping to catch a glimpse of the remarkable bond between Coco, the silverback gorilla, and Moxie, the once abandoned puppy. The two were inseparable, their companionship rewriting the story of survival and trust in the animal kingdom. But the most surprising element was yet to unfold. Though the wild dog pack had once been a looming threat, their behavior had shifted into something unusual, something almost cooperative. One cool morning, Lena sat by the edge of Coco's enclosure with a notebook in hand, recording observations. The sun peeked through the leaves, casting dappled light on the trio that had gathered nearby: Coco, Moxie, and the wild dogs. The pack had come closer than ever before, sitting quietly near the fence. Ghost, the leader, seemed calm, almost peaceful. The other dogs lounged on the grass, their eyes attentive but not aggressive. Coco noticed their presence. He sat up, making a low hoot, not the threatening kind, but a soft greeting. Moxie, ever the brave puppy now, wagged her tail and barked gently at the dogs. To the surprise of everyone watching, the wild dogs responded in kind. One younger dog barked softly back, another tilted his head, ears perked. The moment was electric. It was as if a bridge had been built, a fragile, tentative connection between creatures that usually would never have crossed paths peacefully. The sanctuary's cameras captured every second. Over the next several days, the pattern repeated. The dogs returned regularly, staying longer each time. They no longer kept to the shadows but rested in the open, within sight of Coco and Moxie. Dr. Chen analyzed the footage with growing fascination. "It's almost like they're forming a social group," he said. "A shared circle of trust, crossing species boundaries." The sanctuary staff began to think of it as a kind of family, a mixed group, brought together by unusual circumstances, each member playing a role in the survival of the others. Coco took his role seriously. He guarded the enclosure's perimeter with watchful eyes, but also allowed the dogs to approach the fence without alarm. Moxie, emboldened by her protector, often ran to the edge to greet the dogs. One afternoon, a breakthrough moment came. Ghost, the leader, sat close to the fence, head lowered. Coco approached slowly, sitting beside him. For a long moment, the two leaders, one gorilla, one dog, shared a quiet gaze. Then, Ghost did something no one expected. He extended a paw toward Coco's hand. Coco reached out, gently touching the dog's paw with his massive fingers. The sanctuary fell silent. It was a moment of pure connection, a symbol that trust had been earned, that the old instincts of fear and aggression were being replaced by something new. Word of the sanctuary's extraordinary family spread quickly. Scientists and animal lovers around the world marveled at the bond that had formed. Documentaries were planned. Social media buzzed with clips of the gorilla, the puppy, and the dogs living together in harmony. But with attention came new challenges. The Sanctuary had to balance protecting this fragile peace with managing the increasing number of visitors. More eyes meant more risk. The wild dogs, still wild by nature, had to be respected from a safe distance. Coco seemed unfazed by the attention. He continued his daily care of Moxie and his watchful acceptance of the dogs. The sanctuary staff often found themselves watching in awe at how a giant silverback gorilla had become the unlikely glue holding together an unprecedented alliance. Behind the scenes, however, questions remained. What had triggered this strange unity? Was it simply compassion? Was it survival? Or was it something even deeper? Lesson from nature, that cooperation can overcome instinct. One thing was clear. The story of Coco, Moxie, and the wild dog pack was far from over. It was a story that challenged assumptions, stirred hearts, and offered a glimpse of hope in a world that often seemed divided. As evening fell over the sanctuary, Coco lay down with Moxie curled against his side. The wild dogs rested nearby, their presence a quiet reassurance. In that moment, the line between species blurred, and a new kind of family was born. The days grew warmer as summer settled over the sanctuary, and with the change in season, the unusual bond between Coco, Moxie, and the wild dog pack deepened in ways no one could have predicted. Lena watched closely from her usual spot near the enclosure, notebook in hand, heart pounding with a mix of awe and disbelief. The scene before her was unlike anything she had ever witnessed: a gorilla, a puppy, and 3 wild dogs sharing the same sunlit patch of grass. Coco sat calmly, his massive form relaxed, as Moxie darted playfully between the dogs. The dogs, in turn, did not chase or growl. They lay quietly, their eyes soft and watchful. Their tails thumped gently against the earth, a sign of contentment rather than aggression. The atmosphere was peaceful, almost surreal. Dr. Chen, observing from a distance, whispered, "It's a shared circle and acceptance beyond instinct. They've created their own community." The sanctuary staff documented every moment, their cameras capturing video and photos that would soon travel the globe. The footage showed Moxie chasing a butterfly, with Coco gently nudging her aside to protect her from a wayward leaf. The wild dogs watched with calm interest, occasionally lifting their heads to follow the puppy's movements. The pack's leader, Ghost, sat closest to Coco, his gaze steady and respectful. There was no sign of the tension or hostility that had once defined their relationship. Instead, the animals seemed to have reached an unspoken truce, a quiet understanding that transcended species and old fears. Visitors, who had come seeking a glimpse of the strange friendship, found themselves holding their breath, witnessing a moment of harmony that seemed almost magical. As the day wore on, Coco rose and stretched, then carefully approached Ghost. The gorilla lowered himself to the ground, extending a large hand in a gesture that seemed both cautious and trusting. Ghost responded by nudging Coco's palm with his nose. A soft whine escaped his throat, a sound that carried no threat, only recognition. Nearby, Moxie barked playfully, inviting both the dogs and Coco into a game she had just invented. She chased a fallen leaf, her paws light and quick, while the wild dogs watched and then gradually joined in. Their movements relaxed and joyful. The sanctuary team marveled at the transformation. Where once there had been fear and competition, now there was companionship and cooperation. Dr. Chen reflected, "This is not just survival, it's evolution in social behavior, in trust. They're teaching us that connection is possible, even between the most unlikely of friends." But with the growing bond came new responsibilities. The sanctuary needed to ensure that the animals remained safe, and that their interactions did not lead to accidental harm. The staff carefully monitored every encounter, ready to intervene if needed, but hopeful that nature would continue to guide this extraordinary alliance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Coco sat quietly with Moxie curled at his feet. The wild dogs rested nearby, their eyes half closed but alert. The sanctuary was silent except for the soft rustle of leaves and the gentle breathing of its inhabitants. In that moment, it was clear that something remarkable had been created, a shared circle of trust, respect, and unexpected friendship, and it was only the beginning. The sanctuary was buzzing with activity. Journalists had arrived from all over the country, drawn by the heartwarming story of Coco and Moxie, and the wild dog pack that had, against all odds, become part of their unusual family. Cameras were set up around the enclosure. Visitors waited for hours just for a glimpse, and researchers from various fields gathered to observe the phenomenon. Yet, despite all the attention, Coco remained unchanged. He was still the gentle giant who carried Moxie on his shoulder and watched over her with the same tender care as before. His presence seemed to calm the wild dogs as well, who had become less wary of humans but remained cautious. Lena sat beside the enclosure, watching Coco as he groomed Moxie with slow, deliberate movements. The puppy's eyes were half closed in contentment. It was a peaceful moment in a whirlwind of excitement. Dr. Chen approached, his expression thoughtful. What we're seeing here is more than just interspecies tolerance, it's compassion, genuine empathy. Lena nodded. It's hard to believe something so simple could change everything, but compassionate crosses every boundary. The sanctuary staff had learned to read Coco's moods. When he was content, the entire enclosure seemed calm. When something was wrong, even Moxie sensed it and stayed close. The wild dogs, too, were attuned to the silverback's signals. One afternoon, a small crisis tested this delicate balance. A sudden storm swept over the sanctuary, bringing heavy rain and howling wind. The animals scrambled for shelter. Coco quickly gathered Moxie in his arms and moved to the densest part of his enclosure. The wild dogs, caught in the open, sought cover nearby but seemed hesitant. Lena watched as Coco rose and made a series of soft, calming sounds toward the dogs. Slowly, the pack approached, and Coco made space beside him. The dogs hesitated, then curled up next to the gorilla and the puppy. For hours, they stayed together, sharing warmth and shelter. It's moments like this, Lena said quietly, that show the true power of kindness. Coco didn't just save Moxie, he brought everyone together. The storm passed, but the lesson remained. In the weeks that followed, the sanctuary team observed new behaviors. The wild dogs began to bring small gift sticks, leaves, even bits of food near the enclosure's fence. It was a gesture of trust and perhaps gratitude. Moxie, now stronger and more playful, accepted these offerings with joyful barks. Coco acknowledged them with gentle touches. The sanctuary became more than just a refuge. It was a living classroom, teaching lessons in compassion and coexistence that humans too often forgot. Visitors left inspired, often moved to tears by what they had witnessed. Social media was flooded with stories about Coco and Moxie's unlikely family. Donations poured in to support the sanctuary's work, and through it all, Coco remained humbler, silent guardian whose heart had opened the door to something extraordinary. One evening, as the sun set, Lena sat beside the enclosure and whispered, "You changed everything, Coco." The gorilla looked at her with wise, understanding eyes, and in that moment, it was clear, compassion was the true bridge between worlds. The sanctuary had become a place of quiet celebration. Moxie, once a fragile, trembling puppy moments from death, was now thriving. Her fur was glossy, her eyes bright, and her playful spirit had returned with full force. She bounded through the enclosure with the energy of a pup half her age, her tail wagging with unrestrained joy. But what made her story truly remarkable was not just her recovery, it was the family she had found. Coco remained her steadfast guardian. Every morning, he carried her on his shoulder during their daily walks, pausing to inspect her every movement. His care was constant and unwavering. The sanctuary staff often marveled at the gentle way his massive hands cradled her, careful not to cause even the slightest discomfort. Outside the enclosure, the wild dog pack continued to watch from the edges of the forest. They no longer approached as intruders but stayed as quiet sentinels, a presence that seemed protective rather than threatening. As summer gave way to fall, the sanctuary prepared for Moxie's official adoption. The team had long decided she would stay with them, living a unique life, surrounded by the creatures and people who had come to love her. Visitors came in larger numbers now, eager to meet the puppy who had been saved by a gorilla and embraced by a pack of wild dogs. The story had touched hearts worldwide, becoming a symbol of hope, resilience, and unexpected friendship. One crisp morning, the sanctuary held a small ceremony. The staff gathered around the enclosure, with cameras rolling and hearts full. Moxie, sensing the importance of the moment, sat quietly beside Coco. The director spoke softly. "Today, we celebrate Moxie's journey from near death to new life, and we honor Coco, who showed us that kindness knows no bounds." Coco sat proudly, watching the crowd with calm eyes. He nudged Moxie gently, who responded with a happy bark. After the ceremony, Lena led Moxie back inside, where the puppy curled up in her favorite spot near Coco's resting place. The gorilla settled beside her, their bond stronger than ever. As the sun set behind the trees, the sanctuary fell into peaceful silence. The animals rested, and the staff reflected on the journey they had witnessed. Coco's actions had changed the course of many lives. He had shown that empathy transcends species, that compassion can bridge the widest divides. Moxie's new life was a testament to survival and love, a story that would inspire generations to come. And the wild dogs, they remained a quiet part of the sanctuary's story. Their presence, a reminder that even the fiercest instincts can be softened by understanding. The sanctuary became more than a refuge. It became a symbol of hope, and in the heart of the forest, beneath the open sky, a gorilla, a puppy, and a pack of wild dogs had taught the world a lesson it would never forget.